All right, welcome to session 38 of AM at FinTree. Today we have an extremely interesting guest. Let me introduce Anand to you. I have a large introduction of Anand here with me. I'll just pick up some snippets out of it. So you're a serial entrepreneur with multiple ventures in AI, fintech, and startup incubation. Correct me if I go wrong somewhere. You're founder of Rian, which is a AI-powered translation platform. Founder of Visitech, which got acquired by a DG Financial Tech. FTB Group, which supports tech in India and Japan. Then you worked in Japan for over a decade.
Yes.
Decade, okay. Then you're currently promoting India-Japan collaboration through tech and entrepreneurship. Then you also have a academy, Raikian Academy, which is helping women and remote workers in AI tools. And then you have thought leadership on entrepreneurship. So that's a big thing, Anand. I think this is your formal. We picked it up from your LinkedIn profile. Why don't you take 2 minutes and introduce yourself to the audience in terms of what has been your career journey? तू पुण्याचा मुलगा आहेस.
हो एकदम.
So let's start there. So your schooling was in Pune, and then maybe take us through your journey in maybe quick 2-3 minutes.
Yeah. So hi, this is Anand. I started my career in actually I did my engineering in Mumbai and I started my career in Japan. So I worked there for almost 12-13 years. So again, my professional life, right, like has been in 4 phases. So the first phase where I got an opportunity to work in technology sector. So I worked in entity communications, Theta music technologies, and I worked on server side as well as mobile programming as well in the first phase.
This was in India or
in Japan.
So your first job directly
was in Japan. Yes. So let's actually go one step back also. So I did my engineering in Mumbai. In instrumentation, and before that 12वी पर्यंत, right, like I did माझं सगळं पुण्यातच education झालं. Interestingly, while doing engineering, I did my Japanese as well. So I did certificate diploma and advanced diploma from Pune University while doing engineering in Mumbai.
Okay.
So
you were fluent in Japanese language, I'm assuming.
So look, I mean, those who learn Japanese, they never say that they are fluent. So I am not supposed to. I mean, the way like CFA analysts are not supposed to say they are CFA, they are CFA charter holders. Similarly, in Japan, right, like there is a way like they call kenson, right? Like, I mean, being modest. So, kiti yet asla tari you are right like a learning, right? Like, so, yeah, I mean, so
so you were moderately good in Japanese.
Okay.
So then you went to Japan, you worked for 12 years there across different firms.
Right.
And then after Japan, you decided to come back to Pune.
Right.
I mean, what was the reason for that? Because a lot of people I know, once they reach to such a good place,
right,
they don't want to come back. What was the calling for you to come back to India?
Right. So that was the time, right, like when I was entering into the third phase, right? Like, I mean, as I mentioned, 4 phases. The first phase is in technology. Then, second phase was in getting into capital markets. So I worked in Citigroup for almost 7-8 years in Citigroup. And then, when I was about to move to India, I was thinking what to do, right? Like, I mean, there was one way, right, like for me to get in Mumbai and work in Citigroup. But my wife, right, we once Punekar, always Punekar. So my wife and we decided to stay in Pune and thought, right, like, okay, let's start something by ourselves.
So she was the main reason you're back here. One of the
there was personal situation as well. My there was some situation in family where I had to come to India almost 5-6 times in a year. So we decided since I have to come many times, why not to move there? So I also tried doing working from Pune for City Japan. There are some regulatory requirements, but internet was not great at that time, right? Like in 2011-12. So I was not able to constantly work. So I thought, okay, instead of doing it in a halfway, perhaps I'll start something by my own.
And then this fourth stage. So once you came back to India, then what was done? Because I think that's the time we met.
Yeah, that's the time, right?
Yes. I had this must have been 2011 or 12.
Yes.
I just started teaching for CFA that time.
Right.
Or probably was teaching for a few years, but CFA FinTree had just started around the same time.
Right.
And I remember you walked in one day, and you said CFA level 2, you want to
Right.
do CFA
Yes.
level 2
Oh, very
sessions,
good.
right?
Yes. Level 2.
So what happened after that?
Okay. So I'll talk about like CFA level 2 as well. But I mean, how I started with my CFA journey. So when I was at Citi, I wanted to get into auto sector, because auto sector guys, I mean, they like analysts used to travel a lot. And I thought like, okay, this is a great area, right? Like I should get in. And Citigroup had a policy at that time. I mean, if you have a level 1, CFA level 1, you will easily, right, like enter into that. And that's why I took level 1. I cleared level 1, and I thought like it is very straightforward. So, I mean, it was like it happened by fluke. In fact, one of my managers said, it must be a fluke, right? Like at that time, because level 1, right, like in first attempt was very, I mean, was rewarding at that time. But at that time, right, like we were going through a lot of financial crisis, and if you remember, right, like Lehman Brothers, 2008, 2009, and Citi was also going through a lot of challenging situation. So they asked me, I mean, I will promote you in the same division rather than going there as an analyst. They made me head of analytics and alternative research, and that's how, right, like I continued at Citigroup. And since, right, like my I mean, whatever I wanted, I got. I didn't actually go for level 2. But when I came back to Pune, I saw everywhere like FinTree, right? Like was the advertisement at the time was very good.
Yes, we were very aggressive back
very then. Aggressive, right? Like so. I called you, and I thoroughly enjoyed, right? Like say, even though, right, like I didn't attend all the sessions, but I mean the process, right? Like I think I tried to take 2 times, but yeah, I mean it was
no, second time you didn't take.
Yeah.
Second time when your exam was due and I called you, you were in some resort in the outskirts of Pune, and then you were hesitant to tell me to put the glass. So I remember.
I've got a good memory, I must say, yeah.
Okay. So then what was the journey after that? Like what did you do once you were back in India?
Yeah.
I think that's when you did your first startup in India, right?
Yes,
Which was that?
So this was Visitech Solutions, right? Like the first startup. So what I did, I mean, in Citigroup, I used to create a lot of products, analytics products. So which was, right, like a combination of quants and fundamental research. So for example, I had the company 360 degree, right? Like where you could get the view of company 360 degree, right? Like view of the company by looking at the financials, the consensus data, right? Like we're looking at like a lot of things. We have this relative value analyzer. A lot of products I built over there. So I thought of I will create it over here, and also, right, like I mean I thought like Citigroup and like other companies will also use it. So that's how I created 8 products. And interestingly, Bloomberg was, right, like creating this app store. And Apple already had App Store, and that was a success story. And Bloomberg also started App Store. And
you mean the Bloomberg terminal?
Terminal, yes, okay. Terminal. So we reached out to Bloomberg, and they did like a lot of tests, and we were the first company to put our applications on Bloomberg terminal. So there were 6 applications that we had on Bloomberg, and that's how, right, like I thought, okay, I will focus on this, and will continue the journey. So Visitech Solution was the first company. And we developed 6, I mean, total 8 products, but 6 products were built for Bloomberg.
Understood. Okay. And then after that, I think then I could see a series of LinkedIn posts of yours where you kept on starting one company after another. Some of your company got acquired by large entities. So what was the journey? So Visitech was one that I'm guessing went on for some time. What happened after that?
Right. ऍक्च्युली ना एक लाईक मराठीमध्ये ते म्हणतात ना की खाण्याचे दात आणि दाखवायचे दात, राईट, लाईक थोडे वेगळे असतात. सो आय मीन व्हॉट यू शोकेस, राईट, लाईक I mean, it was not that easy journey, right? Like, so Visitech also, I remember first 4-5 years where like we were just developing, but we were not able to sell the product. It was very difficult. I was not able to see like any cash coming in. I mean, it was all going out. So in 2016 or so, I thought of starting ice cream shop. I don't know if you know, but
I know. I came to your inauguration. Yes.
So ice cream shop.
So I'll tell you the story. So this gentleman now is running a fancy startup and selling his financial apps to Bloomberg. And then one fine day I call him and he says that me ice cream se dukaan ugadtoy. I'm setting up an ice cream store in Kothurud. And I was like, what? And he said, it's been 5 years. I'm 4 or 5 years I'm running this startup, but I'm not seeing any money coming in. So I need to see some cash coming in. And the best way to do it is if I can set up a retail store. So he set up a ice cream store, and there was also jewelry. I think
yes, yes.
jewelry in the same store. So सामने ice cream, पीछे jewelry.
No, that was very interesting. So, I mean, interesting time. And I I could see, right, like the cash. So whenever, right, like, I mean, generally 9 to 11 was the peak period where a lot of people used to visit, right, like 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. And yeah, I mean, that cash part, right, like I could see and I could sense that cash part. And interestingly, this jewelry shop also worked pretty well because these two were, right, like not correlated shops. So what used to happen, and this is something that I did a lot of research, and I was using a lot of data as well since I was a data analyst earlier, and I mean, like working on the data quite a lot. So through CCTV, I used to see that when anyone enters in the ice cream, they have a lot of time, right? Like, I mean, if they're waiting, figuring it out. So generally, ladies, they used to look at, right, like this jewelry, and the conversion rate was really good. So one of the challenges that I saw, right, like for any jewelry shop, was the footfall, right? And here I'm getting footfall, and I'm trying to leverage that existing footfall, and it worked pretty well, right? Like at that time.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of boutique stores also have coffee shops in built, right? You'll see a lot of designer wear clothing. They will also have coffee shops.
Yeah.
Because a coffee shop will get the people in and make them spend time.
Right.
And then they see your product and make the same thing.
But with coffee, I think, the sentiments when you're eating ice cream, you're very happy. Right. So, I mean, I just thought that, right, like that, if I could actually get that, but I'll tell you, right, like it was good for women, but it was not good for the men accompanying with them because they were not enjoying that part because they were there to enjoy, right, like that moment that, and that didn't happen. So, I mean, that was a learning also for me that I didn't think about that part.
Right.
Being men, right, like I was, like I had a sympathy for them. But yeah.
Sure. And then what was the next venture after that?
Yeah. So in 2017-18, then, I decided that for some reasons, right, like this Bloomberg app, we're able to sell around 200 applications, but we're looking for 10,000 applications. Then only, right, like it would have been this economy of scale and something, right, like that could have been meaningful. In fact, like 1 or 2 applications saw that level of growth as well, but due to some policies, right, like at Bloomberg, they stopped those applications. Consensus Paper was one of them. It was one of the best products that we built where we were actually getting all the data from consensus and finding out outliers so that you can focus only on the outliers. So if someone has given sell recommendation out of 30 analysts, you can just talk and figure out, right, like why he has given that sell. So instead of, right, like doing doing this manually, we did some automation on that part. But unfortunately, that actually, right, like stopped. So I thought, let's not be dependent on someone else, right, for the future. Let's focus on services sector, right, like at that time. And which services sector to focus on? I thought, okay, payment gateway was booming at that time. So I started working with one payment gateway company. It is one of the largest payment gateway companies in Japan. We started with just one person, and now, right, like we have built, right, like a very good empire for them. So yes, that was, right, like the beginning of this DG and Visitech Solutions relationships.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then when did Rian come into? Rian is because I see a lot of I saw you on your LinkedIn profile, the famous chef. वो कौन है? पंजाबी जो है ना?
Kapoor.
Brar. No. Ranbir Brar, right?
No.
Sorry.
Sanjeev Kapoor. Yes.
Sanjeev Kapoor. You apparently tagged him on LinkedIn and converted. So he has a business. It's an AI tool, but correct me if I'm wrong. It can translate that video into multiple languages. For example, now we're recording this video in English, but with his tool, I think we can convert it to Marathi or Hindi or a lot of other languages. Yes. So what he did is he converted one video of that particular celebrity, Sumoto, correct? Like he converted that video without talking to him, and then he uploaded that video, which was recorded maybe in Hindi, he converted that to some other language. Yeah. And then he tagged him saying, this is what I can do for you. And then I think you did.
So, account, yes. So what happened? My team actually translated that. And I mean, we are not supposed to translate, right? Like any video that comes and like leverage that. So I wanted to take his permission. So I thought of uploading that on YouTube and reaching out to him. And we got, right, like 3 times we met. I mean, in fact, like I'm trying to see what I can do for him in Japan, where we are actually taking the Indian, his videos, right, like and making that as a channel, or right, like creating this, collaborating, right, like with some of the media producers as well. But yes, I mean, I got, right, like, so when I posted on LinkedIn, I didn't have any connection, right, like where, I didn't have any direct connection to reach out to him. But within 1 week, right, like I got an opportunity to meet him, and he said that I wanted to meet you because so many people are showing me this video that, I mean, there was no way, right, like I could have stopped actually meeting you. So it was
interesting.
Yeah, LinkedIn is very powerful, platform.
So tell us a little bit more about what Rian does.
Yeah.
So as I understand, it's a video translation tool.
Right.
But I think I asked you this question even back then, that doesn't Google also do that, right? Google Translate could also do some sort of a translation.
Yes.
So where is the differentiation? What does Rian do today?
Right. So, okay, I mean, let's go, right, like with the first step, right, like how I started this company and why we started this company. So as you know, right, like in the early stages, I was struggling with the apps, right, like Bloomberg apps, selling those apps. But I was pitching that in Japanese in Japan. So what many people told me that, like, look, Anand, I mean, we don't have requirement for this, we don't have budget for this, but since you're actually pitching in Japanese, we have got a lot of Japanese material. Can you help us translate that? And I saw, okay, Lakshmi aa rahi hai. I mean, like, why not to say no? I mean, we started, but my investors, they said that let's not actually focus on this. Because then, it will dilute, right, like our focus on this a specific area, right, like which we are working on. So I thought, like, okay, maybe let's start like a different company at that time. So we didn't know anything about localization at that time. I mean, although I was speaking.
Sorry, what is localization?
Localization is, I mean, one form of translation. I mean, localization is making the content relevant to the local audience. It's not just word to word translation. So just to give you an idea, if I'm actually watching this movie Dangal in Japanese, and उसमें वो आमिर खान कहता है कि ये मेरे दोनों बेटे सचिन और सहवाग है. I mean, if I translate that in Japanese or Spanish, Sachin or Sehwag, like, I mean, people will not figure out, right? So at that time, you have to localize it by using the players' name that are popular over there.
Interesting.
Then it will become, right, like, so that's the difference.
That's okay.
Yeah. So when we started this translation company, I mean, I just thought that so like going back, right, like, I mean, I didn't have any intention to start this business initially, but since there was this opportunity, we thought, okay, we'll start this. And then I found that there are a lot of manual things that are done in the translation process itself. So we started in 2014-15. We started receiving a lot of work in the translation company, and this company had been profitable, right, like from day one. And it was making, right, like good revenue also. Then we had some people, right, like from Japan, Japanese staff, right, like was also here in Pune, right, like helping the translation work. Then I found that since there are a lot of manual steps, what can I do to, right, like do the automation, automate that? And there are, right, like few softwares also that are doing, but they were built from software perspective. I thought, okay, why not translators can build something for them themselves. So we started with small tools. And just to give you an example, for example, if you receive a document with like 1,000 pages, right, like RFP or right, like some information document, and you share that with 50 translators. Okay, what happens? You have to give like some part of that document to translate.
Correct.
So project manager, once they receive that document, they have to do this manually, right? Like, and they spend perhaps 8-9 hours just to copy paste. Allocate. And then there is a problem. If there is any change in the formatting, it gets, right, like, I mean, they have to do that work again. And this was, right, like back in 2017-18. Then I thought, okay, let's actually start creating the tools. And simple tool that we did, okay, 50 translators they will send. With just one click, he will be able to create that document. So he doesn't have to do that manual work, right? So that's how, right, like we started focusing on building some automation. And initially it was just focused on documents because that's what, right, like we're working on. But two things happened, right? Like in one of the events, in startup events, I saw one company that was doing YouTube translation. It was back in 2020 in Finland, right? Like I saw, and that company just with idea, there is $10 million US. So I thought, okay, is this a market, right? Like then I did some I checked, right, like whether this is a good market or not. We started implementing SRT and like other small functionalities we started putting in our platform. But 2-3 years ago, we found that the synthetic voices, if you know, right, like if you have seen a lot of videos now, you can create the human-like voice, synthetic voices, digital but synthetic voices. So when I saw that that is emerging, we decided, I mean, in fact, like we had this internal hackathon, and in the hackathon, we decided, okay, let's basically start, right, like with this opportunity. And 2 years ago, again, we were very in initial stage, because I felt that this is again straightforward, right? Like video translation, kya, I mean, like video dalo, I mean, just voice uske upar dalo, and then you're done. It's not like that. I mean, there are so many intricacies. So just to give you one small thing, there is, right, like this one joke, right, like that used to come. I'm sorry, I mean, like if you have to translate something in Hindi or Marathi, the big English statement or can be like just translated by using like, I mean, it has got, right, like all the basically. So there are so many nuances that you have to look into when you're translating, especially the length of sentences changes when you translate from one language to another, especially from Asian languages to European languages, because our language is very high context language, whereas their language is low context. So you have to put the complete whole sentence, right, like whole sentence. So I never thought about that, right, like at that point in time. But when we started actually working on it, we thought, okay, I mean, we can address some of the issues. Some of the issues we cannot address, we'll have to find out, right, like a way. And that's how, right, like we developed this video localization.
Today, what is it? Is it a service company? Is it a product company? For example, now we have a lot of FinTree videos which are in English.
Yes.
Can I subscribe to your tool, upload all my videos and convert them to Hindi, English, Marathi?
Right.
Does it work that way today?
So no, yes and no, right? Can you upload and can you do the translation? Yes, you can do it. But what I've seen that any video watching, right, like is adrenaline rush moment, right? Like, I mean, it generates. So at any point in time, if you feel that, I mean, this is right, like, I mean, done mechanically or something which doesn't have personal, touch to it, you may not watch it. And currently we are staying in the attention economy. If you see, attention economy is, right, like more videos, right, like are watch, especially on YouTube also. Correct. More attention you'll get, the algorithm will push your video. There are a lot of benefits, right, like that you could see. So it's very important that we, so my hypothesis, right, like when doing this video localization is use whatever automation that is possible in the world for localizing it, and then put a creative touch by a human at right points,
right,
to speed up, right, like the process. So currently we are doing a lot of anime localization and I mean, Indian anime, like outside. I mean, we are working, right, like on some outside Japanese anime as well. What we are doing is we are just scaling up the process. So typically, if 52 episodes video, if it is requiring 3 to 6 months to dub it completely, we are able to do it in 10 days.
Right.
So that's how, and the cost and speed and everything.
Potential scope is maybe someone like Netflix can use your tool and services and then localize all their content, because I already see that happening. Jio mein वगैरह दिखता है ना आजकल, you can choose 10-12 languages.
Yeah.
So they're using somewhat similar to what you're doing now.
Yes. So currently they're using everything, I mean, most of the things manually, and it's a very cumbersome process. So we are actually creating. So currently we are producing around 250 minutes per day, 250 minutes of videos. And my vision or my goal is to take it to 1 lakh minutes per day. And if you're able to even get to 10,000 minutes per day, I think we would be the largest dubbing studio in the world.
Interesting. Very nice.
So and coming back to the business part, yes, we can, in fact, like what we are doing with few companies where they have volunteers also, we are providing them the platform. We are teaching them how to use the platform, and they are translating that into multiple languages. Yes. But it has to be culturally relevant. I mean, we just don't want to, I mean, if Rian is going to work on, I mean, we want to work on the quality. So the goal is making quality content and scaling that and making that accessible throughout the world rather than taking any content. So, yeah.
Okay. So Anand, we'll move forward a little bit now.
Absolutely.
Most of the audience who are listening to us today are probably finance students, mostly students, 19 to 30 age group, trying to figure out what to do next. Right? So we'll probably take line of questioning in that direction now. So my observation of you for last 13 years now I know is you have incredible people skills, right? And I think a lot of things that I've done, uh, my personal observation, a lot of things that you've done, multiple ventures, is because you've been able to identify the right set of people, recruit them, and deploy them in the right position. So someone who's probably starting an entrepreneurship today or considering,
Right.
or even networking for job purposes, what do you recommend people to, how do they build people skills? How do they build networking skills so that they can leverage on the network in the future?
Right. No, that's a very good question, and it's also again requires context, because what they want to do, right, like, is also very important. I personally think that not everyone needs to start a company. I mean, there are two types of people. I mean, I call three.
So let's say
actually.
even someone wants to have a job,
Yeah.
right? But you still need network because you need references and grow. So how do I grow my network? What do you do?
Okay. So growing the network, right? Like, I mean, I was right from my first day in Japan. Right, like, I built very good relationships with my colleagues, right? Like, and that's very important. So I was spending, and you don't need to do a lot of extra things. You just need to give them the respect, right? Like, what they deserve. So one of the things that I have seen is, whoever I've worked with, or whatever managers that I've worked with, right? Like, I have a very good relationship. So that's a very starting point. And I remember, right, like, one very great advice when I joined Citigroup. The culture there is very different, right? Like, I mean, and it was Solomon Brothers at that time. So Solomon Brothers, right, like, they inherited the culture from Solomon Brother, which was very cutthroat competition.
Acquired Solomon Brothers?
Yes, at that time. And I mean, I joined like in Solomon, and then it got acquired. So I mean, it was very interesting period, right? Like, for me. So I saw there, right, like, there is a cutthroat competition, and especially in financial world, it's like, you're like finding, right, like, maximum pie for you. But what I felt over there as well, if you collaborate, right, like, in a proper way, rather than just competing, right, like, with them, a lot of doors, right, like, will be opened. And I think, one of the things I really liked about working with Citigroup. I mean, I worked with incredibly competent people, right, like, over there. So if you are going to join any company, just ensure that you try to work with people who are incredibly competent, and someone who have achieved like quite a lot, right, like, in their in that company, respect, right, like, and in that company, and try to spend time with them. So what I did, right, like, I used to, right, like, send messages to MDs. I used to go out for lunch, dinner, and that's how, right, like, I created, right, like, a bond as well with them. There was this mentor mentee program. I joined that program, right, like, in the beginning. Then one very good advice, right, like, that I got at that time was, when I joined this company, my friend told me that, like, look, your boss, right, like, I mean, is going to be, right, like, if he gets promoted, then only you're going to get promoted. Okay, so ensure that, right, like, I mean, you're doing everything to uplift your boss. And he said one very interesting part: that doesn't mean that you're going to work, right, like, on his personal things. Just focus, right, like, on professional things. I mean, be so good, right? Like, I mean, his job becomes easy, and he start looking for something else, right? Like, for himself. So that was a very important part, right?
So when he looks for something else, you take.
Yeah, you take, right? Like, I mean, and similar things happened also, right? Like, over there. And like, I got promoted, and I mean, I got the promotions and like other parts. And since I was good, right, like, with people, I mean, it became easy for me to get into that level as well. So I told you, right, like, I mean, getting into getting as an analyst in auto sector was very difficult. But the founder, the head of auto sector, was a good friend of mine. I mean, we used to go for a lunch couple of times, even before I asked him to go there, right? Like, I mean, I asked to join, and he said, yes, why not? I mean, whatever policies are there, just follow that and get in. So that's how, right? Like, I mean, it's all about connections. And here, right, like, let me give one very recent example. I read, right, like, this book, The Diary of CEO, Stephen Bartlett.
Yeah.
He has given one amazing example, and I think, this could be very helpful. I hope, right, like, if I knew, right, like, this part earlier, perhaps my approach could have changed. So he said that our professional life is in 5 buckets. Okay, so first bucket is where you acquire knowledge. Okay, so you acquire knowledge. Second bucket is where you create your skills. So using that knowledge, you create, right? Like you hone your skills. The third bucket is networking bucket. So networking bucket is where, from day one, I mean, whenever you join, right, like any company, from day one start. Look, I mean, when you are in the company, it's very easy to approach anyone in the company. Once you leave the company, nobody is going to spend time with you. Zoparanta Chandi Toparanta Gandhi, right? Like, I mean, the way we say, right? So nobody is going to ask you, right? Like, I mean, when I was at City, I was, right, like I could do anything, but like City cha bahar aale nobody was, right? Like, I mean, of course, right, like there were good relationships also, but I mean, just like whenever you are in big institution, leverage, right, like the connections. The third is networking, and don't just, so what I used to do, right, like interesting thing that I used to do, and I could still leverage, right, like those connects. So I used to do uh, you know, so I was on sales side. So what I did, right, like sales side meetup. And I invited, right, like different analysts, right, like from different companies, and 40, 50 people used to come together. And it was
You used to
also,
organize the
yeah, I
meetings
used to
yourself.
organize this meeting. So this was also a great way, right? Like, and in Japan. So imagine, right, like the exposure that I could get, right, like over there. By organizing, participating, and there are a lot of companies or a lot of places where like they organize events. Just tell them that like I will be, right, like a volunteer. They will be so happy because nobody is there, right, like to volunteer such things. And I think so. So that was, right, like also the third bucket is this networking. Fourth bucket is resources that you have. Okay. Now, what are resources? Resources are, right, like for example, financial capital that you have. So, for example, if you have some money, right, like that's a resource that you have. If you have your friends who can put some money for you, that could also be, right, like a kind of a resource for you. If you have like any friends like who could do any website work, that is also a resource for you. So
Sure.
these are all, right, like resources that you have, right, like through your own connection. And the fifth one is very important. Fifth one is a reputation, right? Like fifth bucket is a reputation bucket. And I felt that, right, like I mean, if we could fill these buckets, I mean, what we do is when we are learning CFA or learning any specific thing, we are just focusing on learning. So we are just like filling the first bucket. But what about if you just start actually looking at these 5 buckets and start filling those buckets? So if you could do that, I think the returns and the professional growth, right, like that you would see would be really good.
So out of all the things that you said, which is large, if I were to summarize, one you said which struck me is respect people, because I've noticed you do that, right? Because I'd see a lot of people आज क्या म्हणतो आपण सगळे लोक ego घेऊन फिरतात आजकाल. And I tell this to everyone, right, that it's okay if you pay someone a little less, but it's not okay if you talk to them disrespectfully today, right? Because egos are so inflated. So you said respect.
Yes.
Second thing I noticed out of your conversation is I think you have taken a lot of initiatives yourself. You said I reached out to MDs and all of it. I think that's also one very rare skill, right? People generally don't take initiative to contact, reach out, which is also very helpful. Okay, let's move forward now. You now in last 12, 13 years, you've also, I think you mentioned you've done some 23 private investments.
Yeah.
I also remember once you called me from some angel meet. Okay, you might not remember, but you'd gone to Pune angel meeting and you told me I've written a couple of checks or something like that. So what is your thesis on private investing?
Right.
Because 23 is a very large size of book that you're maintaining now.
Yeah.
So what kind of startups do you look at? What kind of companies do you like to invest in?
Right. So, when I started this investment, I think I started in 2019, 18, 19. I didn't think a lot about it. So I was just looking at the founder. If the founder is super passionate, I was just going ahead and, right, like giving money. So over the period, my thesis changed, if you see. But my fundamental part, right, like remained as it is. So one of the things that I look is founder or
so you generally invest at seed stage?
Angel and seed. Angel.
Okay.
Yes. So an interesting part that I do is it's not just my investment. When I invest, I take 10, 15, 20 people with me. So it becomes collectively, right, like a good sum of money, and that can become their moat as well. Or that can also help them, right, like in different angles as well. And we recently started this Starnix company where we help companies raise funds but we also help them with the exit. So we have few cases.
It's almost an investment bank now.
Investment bank. It's investment advisory bank, and we are now thinking of like starting a private or like creating like a fund to invest in companies as well. So my thesis, like of course, right now I focus on areas where I can help those founders. So if I'm able to help the founder, and if that falls in my startup or my focus areas, I definitely talk to him and see like if there is any help that I can provide. But if it is not, I help them connect like with the other people. So that is like one very important area. And the second area that I have is I focus on the passion. I just look at the passion, right? Like even the raw passion, that's fine, right? Like I look at the passion. If the person is passionate, then I'm all willing, right? Like And one more point, right? Like, and this is something recently I understood, right? Like Zaniv, what we call Zaniv Asana, right? Like what is it's called in
So Marathi wala expert, Zaniv means what? Understanding.
Yeah, understanding is like very light word. Awareness is also light. So Zaniv.
Jeev टाकायचा असं
नाही. आता जाणीव असणं is right like what? So if someone is investing, right, like again that respect, right, like providing respect or respect for the employees.
So putting in heart and soul into
empathy, right? Like perhaps like little empathy.
So basically your most of your investment, because at that stage of investing anyways you don't have numbers to work with, right? At angel stage.
Yes.
So you're just looking at who the founder is,
right?
And more than tech skills, you're saying you focus more on their interpersonal behavior characteristics is what you're focusing on. Okay.
So again, if I have to say, I don't bet on a horse. I bet on the horse ride. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
And do you plan to expand on that book further? You said you're setting up a fund.
Yes. So we have created a separate entity. I have got now 6-7 companies where, every company has got one focus area. And that company, right, like grows with that focus area with a proper structure, right, like where someone is leading that company and taking that company ahead. So Sudhanva, right, like is the founder of this Starnex. He is leading the company, and I'm just like one of the shareholders. Yeah.
Okay. So now, Anand, I'll ask one last question for myself, which I generally want to learn from you, and then I'll open up the floor for the audience. I've seen you over the year. You've been able to hire, because you've also hired from us. You've hired people. You somehow have the ability to look at a person and figure out that this person would be a good fit in this role. And I think a lot of your growth, correct me if I'm wrong, has also been on account of having the right people at right places and running the business. How does one acquire that skill, right? How, like, for example, if I have to hire for different roles,
right.
What should I focus more on technical skills? What is your hiring secrets?
So I'll tell you, right? Like, it's not that, I'm correct every time, right? But there are certain things, and I saw Good to Great book as well by Jim Collins, right? Like he says that first who and then what, right? Like, which was right. Like first figure out like whom you want to work with. So I've found out, right, like there are certain qualities and cultural and attitude traits, right, like that works pretty well with me. And there are certain areas, right, like where I have to spend a lot of time also. So again, for every person, right, like it would be different. And also, right, like many times what I do is, of course, right, like it had sometimes happen at some stress on my side as well. But once I give work, I want them to actually leave, right, like with that work and get, to the speed. So
you believe in delegation and then
yes.
complete autonomy to individual.
So, and this was not like what I was earlier. I was getting into the details, but what I found that, sometimes they will surprise you as well, right? Like with the work that they are providing. So believing in them, wherever there is, right, like areas for improvement, you just work with them. And genuinely, right, like, see, so I've got, right, like 2 focus areas, right, like in any company. First, as a company, I want to ensure that company is profitable. And second area, right, like, and I genuinely believe this, that I want, right, like a personal growth of that person. Right, like be that person be right, like with me, or right, like goes anywhere. And if you believe that, that person also, right, like it's like something. If that person is not like a part of the shareholding, right, like of that, that person is also spending a lot of time, right, like with you. So having that zaniv, right, like that we talk about, right, like it's very important. in my opinion.
Very interesting.
And once they get in, right, like in some ESOP and like other, then they start, right, like, I mean, working as if it's their own company. So aligning that, and I would highly recommend, right, like if someone wants to get into, and I would also recommend you to read this book, CEO Excellence. Okay. So CEO Excellence, right, like there, the author, right, says couple of areas, right, like that are important as a CEO. So first, it's setting direction and ensuring that like everyone understands what you really want to do and are they part of, right, like that. And that's a very important aspect. I mean, we tend to spend less time on that, but we need to spend, right, like a good amount of time. The second part, right, like which I felt, right, like was very important was mobilizing, right, like the team. Sorry, the second part was aligning the team. So vision, then align the team, right, like around that, then mobilize the team. So this is what, right, like is very important. And again, it's like a LLM model, right, like which you fine tune. So find out, right, like if that person is not working on this area, like, I mean,
move them somewhere
else. So mobilizing team. For other areas, you don't have to perhaps work because you are the sole founder of this company. But what I've seen, right, like working closely with stakeholders, stakeholders, then you have a board, right, like, or directors, right, like it's also something important as a CEO. And personal growth, right, like it's also, so you constantly need to, right, like grow as well on the personal capacity. And these 4-5 things, if you do, right, like with the right proportion, I think things start falling in place.
Insightful, Anand. Thank you for that. CEO Excellence is what
CEO Excellence, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's all the candidates who are on YouTube. Now I'm going to pick up your questions. Okay, I think we have a few questions coming up. Sure. In the meanwhile, we can start taking some questions here from the live audience. Are they also being streamed, Vishal? Can you put them on the main stream? Okay, so if anyone of you would like to ask a question, maybe this would be a good time. Just start with raising hand. I'll give you my mic. Okay. Will I have to share this mic? Okay, you give this to me. Nice. Introduce yourself.
Nice mic, huh? Good mic.
Anand-san, 今日、FinTree のためにお時間をいただきありがとうございます。私はクナルと申します。22歳です。My question to you is, what is the best way if to build a niche in Japanese finance? Like, how do you learn their economy, and is it a good recommendation to go to study there and find a job, or maybe to search for a job from here?
So Kunal, hajime mashite. So I would recommend you. It also depends. I mean, since you speak Japanese, I would highly recommend see if you could find even an internship opportunity over there, and then again create, right, like build relationships and get join there. But I would highly so if you are very much interested, and if you like create like a very good skill, especially in the financial area, with this Japanese speaking abilities, you will get an edge. So of course, right, like, I mean, opportunity, there is this luck surface area, right, like very interesting concept I read recently, where, getting an opportunity, if that's actually, right, like a luck for you, if you want to increase the probability of the luck, increase the surface area for that. And how could you do that? Like, just try to go there in Japan, create like friends over there. There are a lot of meetups over there. Reach out to a lot of people. And in fact, I would be also happy to connect you to a few analysts over there and ask them, right, like what I need to do, how can I apply, right? Like maybe it will take 1 year or so, but it's possible, right? Like to get in over there.
Another question,
Sure.
Is it advisable to go for a language school over there just to reach Japan and then build a connection and also build your language skills?
So it depends on how good are you right now, right? Like in Japanese, and what do you want to do, right? Like, I mean, what is your plan, right? Like for learning Japanese? My wife learned Japanese in Japan, and she speaks, right, like Japanese really fluently, because I learned in Pune from Punekars. So I've got some like Marathi accent in Japanese as well. But if you learn over there, perhaps you'll see right? Like a lot of differences. But I believe you are learning from Aniruddha's academy, right? Like
Right,
so
right.
Prachi Pimpalkhare. I mean, she's amazing. She's also N1 and they have amazing infrastructure. So I would highly recommend. It all depends on if you want to quickly get the job. For us, it will take right like 1 year if you start deciding to take right now and start this all networking activities and others. So depending on when you want to join, decide that. Second part you could do is you earlier mentioned, right? Like, I mean, you could also find out some institutions over here, right? Like Nomura, and there are a lot of Japanese companies over here. Start working with them. So you'll be able to build relationship within the company itself.
Right.
And if you tell them that, like, I'm also learning Japanese, I mean, that will be an age. So for me, it also happened at a time that when I got a job in Japan for the first time, I got because I was studying Japanese. So I already cleared level 3. I mean, right now it's N3. So that actually gave me an edge. So something like that you can also explore.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Yeah, but I really like the concept of lux surface area. So I don't have a mic, so it'll just be loud. So
Sure,
hopefully
sir.
your mic will catch
Yeah.
up. But this is very, did you notice that lux surface area, which basically means put yourself in a situation where chances of you getting lucky is high.
Higher. Yes, yes. Increasing the probability of becoming lucky.
Very, very. All right, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, hi sir. So my name is Soham and I'm a CFA Level 2 candidate. So my question is when we are dealing with startups, like tomorrow, if luckily I end up getting a job as an intermediary between startup and investors.
Okay.
So many a times what happens is these startups, so what these startups do is they, without validating their idea with experts, they just go for funding.
Right.
So how can we set up something like where we are guiding them ki first you focus on validating the idea, whether it is really good for the world. I mean, for your business, for generating profits and impacting people.
Right.
Yeah.
So look, I'll tell you, right? Like founders, whoever, right? Like founders are, you cannot connect the dots just by looking backward. You have to always look for the future also. So why any founder or entrepreneur starts any journey? Because they are seeing something that not everyone is able to see. Especially, right, like what I've seen, right, like in accounting, we look at the past data quite a lot, right? Like we don't actually look at the future data. So I'll give you one very interesting example. And I still vividly remember that. So in 2002-3, when I was working in Theta Music Technologies, at that time we were going like for lunch. And one of my colleagues, he said that, Steve said that, look, I mean, Apple is going to come up with one iPod or some device that will have 5,000 songs. And everyone said, right, like I still remember, right, like everyone said that it's not possible. I mean, how it's possible, right? Like at that time, Steve Jobs was not the way, right? Like, I mean, we see him right now. So look, most of the times, if you see, people would think, right, like that this is not a great idea. So you have to sometimes, right, like bet on the founder as well. And that's why I said most of the startups fail. Perhaps because they might be thinking something which may not be unrealistic, but unless they try it, you can't figure it out. So I would highly, right, like, I mean, so if that person has a passion, if he has got a right intent, and if he's thinking something which is not possible, then only is going to generate and create a wealth, right, like inorganic or perhaps non-linear wealth. So unless, right, like, and again, right, like you can assess that part, but you cannot connect the dots based on what has happened in the past, which basically, right, like we look at. So if he's taking a bet, how confident is he? Then what is that bet and what risk, right, like that he can take, right? Like it's something that we'll have to look at. But I would highly support like founders in this stage as well. I don't know, right, like with whom you're talking, but yeah, I mean, you have to look into that aspect as well.
And sir, next question is like in this industry, like advisory basically for startups, can we have some kind of an advisory where all the entrepreneurs that are good creative people, but the problem is that they are not good businessmen.
Okay.
So can we is this idea like viable? Can we set up a advisory consulting or a consultancy focused on making them good businessmen?
Yeah. So again, I'll connect this to the previous one. So you have to take a bet, like when you are actually, right, like doing. And you see, right, like there is definitely clearly a gap. And I'll tell you, right, like here's something very interesting part. I mean, like since I've started investing, I mean, I found that companies are running in different orbits. So 0 to 1 is the orbit, 1 to perhaps 100 like is another orbit. So there are different orbits where they actually run. So the first orbit is most chaotic, right? Like, I mean, you don't know what's happening. So you have to test as well. So I cannot tell you, right, like that this will work. What you have to do is you have to talk to 10 people. You have to find who's going to pay you money. What value are you going to bring? These are right, like things that you'll have to actually try out, and then you'll be able to figure out. So nobody can say this is going to work, right? Like, but you have to make it work by pivoting it continuously.
I think one insight I have, startups are generally not good customers for consulting business. That's why they're startups. Because पैसे नहीं होते. So therefore, there are a lot of incubation and other models where you take some part of the ownership. But building a revenue model out of startups is like what you're thinking, right? Of consulting is, I would say that it's a little.
No, but you know, I mean, if you have the skin in the game, right? Like as you tell them that, okay, I mean, if I bring this much value to you, give me this much ownership. If you do it in that way, that will work. Because I'll tell you, right, like very interesting part. And this is something not, I mean, and that is why, right, like a lot of frustration happens. So most of the times, right, like startup will be like very less value creating. And there will be just one inflection point time, right, like when it will start, right, like saying this non-linear growth. But do you have a courage? Do you have, you know, that mindset to wait until that time, right? Like it's something very important, right? Like that we have to look into. So, and you rightly said, right? Like for founders, they have huge valuation, right? Like, but nothing in the pocket, right? Like there is like that एक शायरी है कि उनके like founders के like चेहरे पे बहुत हंसी होती है, but दिल में बहुत गम होता है. But असं कि like I mean they go through a lot of actually pain and challenges because you have to look at so many things, right? Like I mean while doing it. So if you could be empathetic with them and tell them that like look, I mean if you are like I will bring the value. If I'm bringing the value, I mean if it makes sense to you and if it actually gets reflected, I mean ensure that, right? Like I mean give me the stakes. And that, I mean, there are very few consultants, right, like use this approach. So if you could use this approach, I think that could be amazing, in my opinion. And I'm happy to connect you to 1 or 2 startups if you're planning to do it in that way.
Sure, sir. Definitely. Definitely.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
But again, if you decide to go that route, which basically means you will also have chehre pe muskan, but dil mein dard, because you will also not be having cash for a few years. Till the time maybe some exit happens in one of the startups. Okay, all right. We'll take maybe we can go to Dhruv there of the class. Everyone who's on YouTube, if I am audible, please keep on posting the questions. We'll be answering them briefly.
Hi, sir. Thank you for coming to talk with us. My question is a bit of a personal one as well as a bit of a two-parter. On the lines of cash flow, you said that for the first 5 years, you didn't see any cash coming into the organization.
Can you keep the mic closer, please?
So my question is, did you have a cushion to fall back upon, or how did you manage those 5 periods without any cash flow? And was that related to your decision to start a secondary business?
Yeah. So yes, that's a very good question, and thank you for you know bringing that question. So it was a very tough time for sure. So since I was in Japan for quite some time, I had some cushion, right? Like I mean, तो कैसे कि like अगर running की race है, तो मैं थोड़ा 20 meters आगे था, right? Like because I had some you know cushion, right? Like with me. But having said that, I you know use that money. I you know then one of the investors invested in the company also. So what happens, right? Like generally, if you see. मेरा मनी गया, मेरे पैसे गए ना, तो दैट्स ओके. बट अगर किसी के जा रहे हैं ना पैसे, तो इट बिकम्स राइट लाइक लॉट ऑफ चैलेंजिंग. आई मीन इट्स अ वेरी टफ सिचुएशन, राइट, लाइक फॉर मी एट दैट टाइम. So yes, it was very difficult, but you know I had right like this another venture. Then I started this ice cream shop just to get the sense of right like how cash flow is, and you know I just wanted to get sense of right like running some profitable business. But you know, I one thing that I didn't tell, right? Like I was going through very tough situation, and मैं ना एक चीज बताता हूँ, and it's very important. I was walking, right? Like I was in Japan at the time. Like we had almost, right? Like I mean, I didn't have any money to pay, right? Like to my colleagues. especially right like in salary. So I had to actually like arrange my personal finances also at that time. And Gautam also right like helped me at that time. My co-founder Gautam is my co-founder. So I was right like walking on the street, and one of my friends right like when he asked me that Anand, everything is fine. Imagine you wake up tomorrow, you have nothing, and you're not even able to right like pay money for the kids school and like kids education. What would happen? And I mean that time right, it hurt me a lot, right? Like I mean I still remember that street, I still remember right like that place. And I stopped for some time because कैसे हुआ था ना, पूरे savings गए थे, like लोगों के पैसे लगाए थे. And of course right like I was reinvesting also, right? Like I mean whatever small revenue that I was making, but it was a very tough time, right? Like at that time. And at that time, I mean maybe you may want to write this down also कि एक hard thing about hard things करके एक book है. And that is amazing. उसमें से ना एक chapter है that actually changed like wartime CEO versus peacetime CEO. So like the idea is I mean when you are in that situation, you cannot be a peacetime CEO. You have to change right like your gears, you have to change your attributes, you have to change right like the way you actually act as well. By hook or crook, right? Like then what happened, right? Like within just 2 weeks, by hook or crook, right? Like I mean I got 2 big deals, and then this deal also started. So yes, I mean it was like a challenging situation when especially like there was no cash flow. But again, right? Like I feel that since I went through that situation, I understood the importance of money also, right? Like this cash flow also, and it taught me a lot of lessons as well. Yes.
So you have to live through the period of suffering if you ever choose that path. Yes.
Can I just follow that up? So, what is your opinion on trading off between simply reinvesting all your revenue and making sure that you yourself get paid in terms of salary to just get by on a personal level?
Yeah. So again, that's a very subjective question, because you need to see right like what type of business you are running in. So if I have right like a shop, I would of course right like any business, like since it's going to be have limited scope of growth, I would actually right like use the finances or cash flow right like differently. But if I'm actually building some startup which has got a scalable future, I will reinvest, right? Like it's something similar to capital budgeting, right? Like I mean you have capital budgeting where you decide if the ROI from the investment activities in the projects is going to be higher, you'll always right like invest over there. Like about salary, I've got a very simple usul. Okay, I've got a very simple rule, right? Like that I have. If the company is not profitable, founders or or CEOs, right? Like or founders, right? Like founders team, they should not take money from the company. They should not take money from investors. They are only responsible. They can only take money when the company is profitable, and if there is any exit opportunity. These are the only two areas, right? Like where they will be able to make money, because then the company becomes consistent. But when you don't have right like money, then what you can do is you can take the basic required money, and this cannot be right like 10 lakh rupees, right? Like per month. It will be right like whatever right like is required. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope.
All right. We have time for one. This is about 12:40. We have time for one last question. If anyone wants to.
Hello.
Imran Hashmi.
Oh.
Of FinTree.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So, hello, sir. So, just following up on Dhruv's question, that you founded Rian, right? Just correct me if I'm pronouncing it right. Rian, right?
Rian, yes.
Rian.
Yes.
Okay. So, you started in 2019 and got your first pay in 2024, like a year ago.
Keep the mic in the next hand.
Yeah. Okay. So, you founded Rian in 2019 and got your first pay in 24, like a year ago. So, after these tough times, and you see a lot of streaming platforms like Netflix, Hotstar already using this AI of transforming this language. Yeah. So how do you see Rian in the next 5 to 10 years?
Very good. So very good question. So I didn't expect this from Imran Hashmi, but this is good that he is also talented. Okay. So I would see that we will be the world's largest dubbing studio and in next 5 years. Currently, we are dubbing, right? Like and translating around 250 minutes of videos. we want to take it to 1 lakh minutes per day. And this is something possible through Rian. Now, how it is happening right now, I mean, of course, there would be like other tools and like other parts. But what we are planning to do is reduce all the manual efforts that are required. So currently, if you see any studio, they go through a lot of processes, right? Like manual processes. And this is very competitive area as well. So if you are able to create like a way where the upfront investment. So I mean, just I'll give you an example. So the YouTubers, what we are planning to do is we'll just talk to them. We'll tell them that we'll run your channel in different languages and let's have a revenue share on that. Okay. So for example, if you see, right, like Rachana channel, right, like it's in Hindi, Rachana Ranade. Rachana Ranade. Similarly, we are talking to a lot of other YouTubers also, and we are trying to see what we can do to ensure that there is this capital efficiency also, because they are not able to invest right now, and we are able to, right, like do it at scale. So if we could actually marry these two things, we could do. So this is one area. OTT platform. Then anime characters. I mean, currently, if you see most of the animes that are happening in India, right, like we are translating that. Now, in India, we did the net practice, right, like, and we are getting better now. Now we have to go, right, like to different markets and see how we could actually expand this. But this is, right, like high quality localization at scale. It's something that we are looking for.
Can I have the mic
Thank you.
back? There are 2 or 3 questions
Okay.
that I'll take.
Okay, sure.
Some anxiety question.
Absolutely.
So I'm on YouTube now. I'm going to try and answer some of the questions. Harshit posted twice that he's tensed about his CFA Level 3 results coming out in 2 days.
Okay.
He says, I don't remember what to do in exam. It's not a question, it's just a comment. And Harshit, nothing you can do. Maybe go on a small vacation somewhere for a couple of days. Arya says, I want to pursue CFA in future. I'm thinking about doing it with BSc Economics. Is it a good choice? Yes, it's a good choice. Generally, economics and finance works out well. Is Symbiosis good or GIP? GIP मेरे को पता नहीं, but Symbiosis is decent. And I think that there's one question which is, okay. The question is actually for you from Jordy18. Can you tell us more about those apps developed for Bloomberg? How do they help analysts and equity research? Yeah, maybe like top 2 apps that you developed, if you can answer those.
Yeah. So for Bloomberg, right, like I will tell. So first one was this consensus sweeper, right? Like I told.
So consensus is basically, let's say if there's a stock, there are maybe 30 analysts working at different places tracking the stock.
Yeah.
Each one of them will have a buy or sell recommendation.
Right.
Consensus would basically be just aggregating their
We'll
views,
scrap,
right?
Like scrap all the data that they have put, right, like for that company.
Okay.
And we'll find out, right, what basically, like how the consensus looks. And we'll find out like outliers from that, so that the data was designed in a way that you can talk to only people. So as a asset management or buy side company, they don't need to talk to all the salespeople if they have same information. They'll talk to someone, right, like who has got a different information. So just
and generally sell side tends to be there's a lot of herding behavior there, right? If one guy says buy, maybe rest 28 will say buy. Very rarely you would have someone who would say sell. So then you talk to only the one who has a different view on the stock. Interesting.
So that was one. Second, very interesting app that we developed was Relative Value Analyzer.
Relative Value Analyzer. Okay.
So at that time, if you remember in 2014-15, it was very difficult to compare the companies. So for example, Toyota, Nissan, if you want to compare these two companies, similar companies, it was like coming to pulling the data and, right, like doing all the regression and like checking, right, like the data with them was very difficult. So we were actually comparing all the companies' historical data along with we were also looking at the net cash and like other opportunities, right, like where this company would grow, and we were creating, right, like some models on top of that. But what I liked, and this is something, right, like that, if that person is planning to actually start or create like their own app, one thing that worked quite a lot, right, like was this net cash, company's net cash screen I created. And this was very interesting, I'll tell you, because I was looking at company like from areas of where they will do the mergers and acquisitions. So a lot of a lot of times you could
Interesting.
find patterns within the company where they are going to do acquisitions. And if acquisition happens, then there is this new interesting data, and perhaps you could see some movement in the stock price as well. So that was very interesting. And when
So you
we did the
basically
valuation-
build a tool that would predict if some company would acquire someone else. Okay.
And that was very popular. Why I'll tell you, because a lot of asset managements at that time, when I was a city, they told me that they created fund based on that screen. So that was very interesting. And they didn't actually recognize at that time, but when I left city, when I was talking, they told one of them already at that time created $100 million US fund on that idea. But that was one. Second was corporate governance. If there is any way, so we were actually tracking corporate governance screen also. That also got a huge traction. So generally, if you see the senior management, they predict what would be the earnings, and we went back to 10 years to see how they predict, what is their predictability, and depending on that, we're creating certain screens, and that was also very interesting, very well received.
Nice. In fact, even today in India, we still have that issue. I mean, despite having so much of data, I think we still find it very difficult to get a hold of corporate governance. Maybe still a white space. Anand, this has been fantastic. I could not ask you a single question that I'd written down in my list. Maybe someday we should have another session and ask you more questions, but thank you very much. Very, very insightful. Can we repeat, before we let you go, all the names of the books he recommended? Because I think he recommended was CEO Excellence, then Diary of CEO, and Hard Things About Hard Things. And I think you also refer to Good to Great in the meanwhile. All right. Thank you very much, Anand. A good one.
Yeah.
Yes.